just to note that in the Māori calendar today, it's Oturu, Rākau Nui, Rākau Mātohi Day, High Energy Days. Good day for gathering for special occasions. And being in the new Māori New Year, it's also good just to reflect on where we've been over the last year, and we were going through in terms of our new conversations for this year. So we welcome you here tonight. To start off, I'll do a karakia that talks about what we're experiencing right outside here. The cold, the wind, the wets, the winds that are blowing onto the lands, the winds that are blowing onto the seas. The new days and the glimpse of a new day through the dawn, which gives us a glimpse of the day ahead. Today, well, tomorrow we hope it's another glorious day, and so that'll be our karakia for this evening. Sorry, excuse me. And then a short mihi to us all gathered here again this evening. Your part again, when you hear the words, tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tina, your response is tina. Okay, so let's have a practice as we do. Tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tina. Haumi e hui e. Very good, very good. We've learned over the past year. So looking back, we haven't done too bad on the karakia. So here we go. Kei noi tātou, let's give thanks. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mākina kina ki tai. E hia ke ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu. Tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tina. Haumi e hui e. That karakia actually means whatever winds blow our way, whatever season we're going through, whether it be a cold, dry, wet season, whatever the winds, tomorrow is always going to be a glorious day for each and every one of us. So that was our prayer this evening, or our blessing on our time. Nō reira, i ngā mana, i ngā reo, ka timata au pienei. Kia hiwara, kia hiwara. Kia hiwara ki tēnei tuku, kia hiwara ki tērā tuku. Kia tū, kia oho, kia matara, tihei mauriora. Te mea tuatahi, māku ka mihi tonu, ki te kaihanga o te rangi o te whenua, ko ia te timatanga me te haka o tinga o ngā mea katoa. Nō reira, ka huri anō ki tō tātou nei kingi Māori, kingi tūheitia, ka noho ana ia i runga te ahurewa tapu o ngā mātua, o ngā tūpuna, nā ka mihi tonu ki te kāhui ariki, me ki rire hau, pai marire. Ka huri anō ki a rātou kua wheturangitia. Rātou e piata ata mai i runga te rangi. Rātou o te kāhui wairua, kua huri tuara mai ki a mātou, kua haere ki tērā kāinga tūturu mo taua nei te tangata, ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāmamau. O ki oki i roto te ringa kaha o te atua. Nā nai homai, nā nai tango whakamoi me titia, ai hoa i ngā wā katoa. Nō reira, koutou mā, nā tangata mai ngā hau e whā, a tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, ko tai mai koutou ki te hakarongo, ki te kōrero o tāmaki makaurau, tāmaki herenga waka, tāmaki herenga tangata. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, hara mai, nau mai, whakatau mai. Greetings to us all as we gather here in another Auckland conversation. I welcome you here to this place, Tāmaki Makaurau, Tāmaki, the place where people love to be. Tāmaki herenga waka, Tāmaki, the place where the waka landed. Tāmaki herenga tangata. One thing about Mātariki, two things that I bring to you. Mātariki, āhunga nui. Mātariki brings people together. Mātariki whiria te tangata. Mātariki, a time where it weaves people together. And so again, we come to this conversation this evening. We reflect, we are reminded of all those who have passed in the year, those who are twinkling stars in the night sky, those who have turned out their backs on us and gone to that place that we call Hawaii Ki Nui, that place over there, Hawaii Ki Roa, that place a bit further over there, Hawaii Ki Pāmamao, Hawaii Ki way beyond the horizon. And so we are reminded of them and their passing. May they rest in peace. But to you, the living that have arrived this evening to listen to the different conversations, we welcome you. Especially to our keynote speakers that are here tonight, we welcome you once, we welcome you twice, we welcome you 3 times. Nō reira, i ngā mana, i ngā reo, rauranga tira mā, huri no tēnā koutou, tēnā tāta katoa. No pressure, I'm just going to leave the waiata for the girls who are going to sing a bit later, so, or even their mother who's sitting in the second row. I hear she's a bit of a singer. So they will sing a song for you later on today. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Well, I think that deserves a round of applause. Kia ora o tēnei. I saw o tēnei at the New Zealand Institute of Architecture Awards, and I took my gorgeous wife and we saw beautiful architecture that night. We saw museums and lovely houses and beautiful creations by the best architects in the country. And at the end of the evening, we were walking home and I said to her, hey, what was the best part about that evening? And she said, I was really moved by that welcome by o tēnei. And I said, actually, that's true. It's such a poetic start to the evening. And I think that's really fitting for today. It's great today. It's such good energy for our conversation tonight. There is one correction, o tēnei. You said that this was another Auckland Conversations. This is the best Auckland Conversations. We're going to outdo every other Auckland Conversation on all of the metrics. Ina mana, ina reo, I rao rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Eagles, Chief Executive of the Green Building Council of New Zealand, and I'll be facilitating the conversation with you, with the panellists tonight. So I've just got some small matters to get through before we start hearing questions in that conversation. We're really proud, Auckland Council, to be providing a night to inspire and stimulate your thinking about the challenges facing Auckland. And I've lived in quite a few different cities. I think it's really special that these evenings are held. Tonight we'll welcome a panel of experts to discuss why density is so important in designing and planning a sustainable future for Auckland. And today, really importantly, we're also launching the Auckland Climate Action Framework. You hear more about that throughout the evening. So thank you for joining us. Again, it looks like it's almost sold out, so that's a fantastic turnout. Obviously, there's real interest in this subject. We also welcome those of you joining online who are watching Auckland Conversations through the website. So first, a few housekeeping matters. In the unlikely event of an emergency, an alarm will sound and will be directed out of the building by our ushers. Bathrooms are located outside the room through the foyer where you might have had a drink or something to eat. And in the likely event of an awesome statement, I would ask you to give a round of applause to the panellists and to support that. I will, just to encourage you, I'll be holding up a sign now and then to suggest applause. That will be, thank you for that demonstration, John. So that will be to someone who I think deserves applause. I think we use the word awesome too much. So I'm on a campaign to change, when we say the word awesome, to change it to say Kane Williamson. And as part of that, I'd like you to support me by, when I put up the sign, Kane Williamson, I'd like a round of applause. Great, so we'll try again. We'll see who's quick on the uptake. Great. Awesome, thank you. I didn't know if that would work. And finally, could you please turn your mobiles to silent, not off, because we'd like those who want to be able to tweet and ask questions via Slido. I'll give you a demonstration of that in a moment. But right now, I would really like to thank our sponsors and our Auckland partners for tonight, South Base Construction, our design partner, Resine, and all of our program sponsors. Thank you for your support. This can't happen without you. So just what's the agenda tonight? Well, it's really special because there's no big speaking slot first. We're getting straight into the conversation after a little bit of an intro from me. So the format for the panel tonight is questions from the floor and online. So just on Slido, we'll be using Slido, which is an interactive question and answer tool for your questions. So if you have a smartphone, we encourage you to visit www.slido.com, so SLIDO.com, and enter the event code density. There was silence in the room. And ask your question. Yes, that's DENSITY, if that was an issue. We will get through as many of these as we can, but importantly, I'll be taking questions from you raising your hand as well. So there'll be hands, there'll be Slido, there'll be things thrown, all sorts of things. So we'll be doing both. If you're not comfortable with smartphones, you can raise your hand. Please remember to make the question a question. So if it's a statement, that it's hard for the panelists to actually leverage off that. So I will remind you of that. We always try really hard to ensure that Auckland Conversations are accessible and inclusive. So on-demand viewing of the event with full transcript and captioning of the event and presentations will be available on Auckland Conversations website in the next few days. Now, on to tonight's conversation. Well, first of all, does all that make sense? Yes. Yep, okay, great. Everyone's into their phones. On to tonight's conversation. So two really important things are happening today. First of all, just to touch on this, because it's a pretty amazing step from the Sustainability Office team of Auckland Council, the Auckland Climate Action Framework has been launched. Hurrah! Yeah, and it does deserve a bit of whooping. That has taken a mere 18 months worth of work, a huge amount of feedback, a 3-day conference. Cities 40, which is a collaboration of the 40 leading cities in the world, have fed in. Mana Whenua have fed in. Government, many of you have had a say. It sets a vision for dramatic change for our city, and there are 11 key moves for change in that. So those aren't dance moves, they're fundamental changes to how we run our city. So I really, really encourage you to have a look at that and feedback. You've got until the 6th of September, and I think it's a really impressive piece of work. So thank you for everything that John, Alec, and all of the team have done there, and everybody who's fed in so far. Now, I will just touch on that briefly with Slido. So in Slido, you can ask questions, but there's also a key question for you to answer that we'd like everyone to answer. It's up there on the screen. It will be there throughout. It is, let me find that. So science says we need to cut carbon emissions by half by 2030. Do you believe we need to do this for Auckland's future? The options are yes, no, I don't know, or maybe go faster. I'm just adding that one, and that one in, you can't actually answer that. Apologies. So do answer that. We'll also have a raising of hands in relation to that. The second key thing we want to discuss tonight is density. So why is density so important in designing and planning a sustainable future for Auckland? Well, global growth is really driving growth in Auckland. People are flocking to Tamaki Makaurau to live and work, and Auckland's current population is projected to grow by 1 million people within the next 30 years. Really significant growth. This unprecedented growth is putting pressure on our communities, our housing, our transport infrastructure, as well as our environment. The quality of life enjoyed by Auckland's future generations will depend on the way we plan and design and build our city. The Auckland Plan 2050 sets the high-level direction for the future of Auckland with an emphasis on developing a quality, compact city. So I thought, in the build-up to this, with some help of a brilliant colleague, Alejandro, I looked at some figures quickly to just compare where Auckland was relative to other cities. It's quite startling. So Auckland, New Zealand has 1,210 people per square kilometre. Do you think that's more or less than Philadelphia and Stockholm? More, put your hand up. Less, put your hand up. Yeah, exactly. So the differences are quite stark. Philadelphia and Stockholm, 4,800 people per square kilometre for about 1.5 million people. Vienna, 5,700 people per square kilometre. Brussels and London, they go similar to Vienna, about 5,500 people per square kilometre. And historic cities like Barcelona, 16,000 people per square kilometre for 1.6 million people. I mean, what? Far out. I don't know. Yeah, that's quite something. So just we've been thinking about density a little bit. So some positives, right? It increases health because people spend less time in their cars, and that's really beneficial. There's actually a really strong study showing that reducing your commuting time reduces the likelihood of divorce, which is positive. Some people might argue it's something else, but it arguably increases the ability of councils to provide community infrastructure, libraries, sports centres. It makes better public transport easier. Anyone who's been to London knows that. Auckland's growing at 750 people per week. We need to get people around. Reduces transport emissions. It leaves more urban space, more rural space for the growing of our food, which is important for south of Auckland. It lowers infrastructure costs. But there are challenges, so we might not have as much green space per home. That's something we need to get used to. We need to think about noise in between our neighbours and getting that right. We need to design well. And we need to think really deeply about things like surface water runoff and other challenges we face, especially as our climate changes. So density needs to be done well. There's a loss of private amenity, but it could be made up by community amenity, and it needs to be planned. Transport needs to be decent. Homes need to be quality. But I think what's really impressive, and you'll hear from John and Penny and others about some of these matters, is we are going in the right direction. So I know, for instance, that since the unitary plan, there's been a 20% growth in the units of housing provided in the terraced and apartment building zones since the unitary plan. And this is really positive, a move in the right direction. So there's lots to discuss in there, and I look forward to your thoughts. At the New Zealand Green Building Council, we champion density through the tools Homestar and Green Star communities, but we think we've really got to get it right. So I'm really delighted to welcome to the panel, up onto the stage, some pretty key people to talk to you about their thoughts. So first up, I'd like you to welcome with some great I'd like to welcome John Duguid, General Manager, Plans and Places, Auckland Council. John has spent 20 years with the council and has a really intimate knowledge of the unitary plan and the changes going on, so he's a great person to have on the panel. Somebody I've worked with a bit and I just know has really great stuff to impart, and it always lends great input. Pamela Bell, founder and former Chief Executive, Prefab New Zealand. And so I went to speak at the Environment Committee a while ago, and I was actually pretty nervous. There were people like the Councillor Penny Hulse on the committee, And I saw these two young women stand up and speak, and I thought, far out, man, who are they? They're polished, they're really on message, they're really professional, and I'm really delighted to welcome both of you up onto the stage at the same time. So Pia Kahui McConnell and Waiata Ramaka Tupe, both are from... Both are from Paha Koe ki Tamaki, and they help educate rangatahi on the impacts of plastic waste. And it's great to have them here to represent rangatahi and how we can get a really inclusive city. So thanks for coming along. Finally, I'm really delighted to welcome somebody you should all know, Councillor Penny Hulse, a legend. So Councillor Hulse, I didn't even need to hold up the Kane Williamson sign, it was just immediate applause. So just with Penny Hulse, I mean, obviously you all know Penny, but what I noted is I've said I was seeing Penny Hulse times before, and each time I've said it, somebody has cut in and said, oh, she's good, like this. So I think it's great to have the panel here. So there they are. We're going to start the conversation with you all. I'll start with you, John, coming this way, and just start with a really simple question about a time where you were in a place that had really good design, the density was good, what it was like, and what was special about it.
Thanks, Andrew. You slightly modified the question there, but with the really good design. But I grew up in the, I guess, mid 1970s, early 80s, in the UK, in a council housing estate. And I grew up in a row of about a dozen terrace houses. I think it's probably about a 90 square metre, 2-storey, 3-bedroom terrace home. And all the houses around there were like that. Some of you might think Coronation Street, but it was a fantastic place to grow up, and I guess some of that stayed with me. I live in a detached house now, but at that time we had parks, easy walking to the school. We knew all the kids in the neighbourhood. There were no big fences on your front boundary and on your rear blocking everyone out. You could see everyone, socialise with everyone. It was just a great way to grow up.
Brilliant.
So we've probably lost a lot of that. Yeah.
So let's talk tonight how we could get some of that back. And Pam, did you want to touch on that?
Sure. On my personal story around density, look, like many of you, I've travelled to Europe, and I love going to places like Stockholm and Scandinavia, where people will just lie out in public spaces on deck chairs and live their lives communally. I think there's great things we can learn about reducing our very British inhibitions. But my personal experiences, I live in a medium density dwelling, if you like, a block of 8 apartments, and I do live in Wellington, but I can empathise. So my block has a shared backyard in Mount Victoria, a city fringe suburb, and if I was to own a backyard like that, it would cost millions of dollars. We have a shared laundry, so I get to interface with the other people who live in the building. We've been living in a 70 square metre apartment, 2 bedrooms, with my 2 daughters, 9 and 12, as a family of 4 for over a decade. And it has been fantastic. There is nothing I would want. I don't need to do maintenance. I have always lived in these kind of low-rise, medium-density spaces because I come from architecture and I'm very interested in the way we live. But I would say what is most interesting is that this building was designed and built in 1929. It was an Austrian architect, but the message here is that these are not new concepts. They're ones that we have been doing very well and very successfully in many parts of the country and many parts of Auckland, and we just need to revisit the lessons that are working well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Pia Waiata, did you want to reflect on a place that's special for you?
Kia ora. Firstly, ki te taho tuku mama no Ngāti Manipoto, ki te taho tuku papa no Ngāti Pirau, ko Penny na kahui makano tuku ingoa. Kia ora whānau, my name is Pia. I am one of the environmental youth leaders for Paragori Tāmaki, and I just wanted to start properly with our PPR. So, my density story is I grew up in Waterview. We had a cul-de-sac outside of our house, and we knew all the neighbours. We had the Samoans next door. We had the old lady that was really mean, and she took our balls every time they went over the fence. And the whole neighbourhood knew that if the ball went over the fence, we weren't getting it back. So yeah, I had community around me 24/7. We had a massive backyard. I had a trampoline and a fijo tree. So yeah, I had a beautiful density story, I guess. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora mai tātou katoa, he uri tēnei no apuhi no te aroa anō hoki ara ka noho nei au ki roto, kei Wainganui ki Tamaki Makaurau. Kia ora mai tātou katoa, ko Waitaname ka tupe tōku ingoa. I am a descendant from the north and the south, but I live in the middle in Tamaki Makaurau. And my density story is, it's quite simple, honestly. I didn't know what density was. I used to just play. We would, I lived in Green Bay, and we had a hub of, I knew where all my friends lived, and because I knew that my community was safe, I was able to walk through. We could play, we could go to Green Bay High School, we could go to Green Bay Primary, and we would just be friends. And it was people that I didn't have any connection to other than they were neighbours. They were my neighbours, and I was safe. And one time I remember that I got hurt, and someone else's mum came out of her house and she helped me. And I remember that there was a community feel to my childhood that really, really stuck with me. So yeah.
Kia ora, thanks a lot. Hey, guys, come on. I am going to be scoring you guys. Okay, I want you to know that. Penny.
Oh, kia ora. I'm still getting over the cricket references. I'm still realising I'm processing a bit of grief. But density for me, I was lucky enough to have 6 months when we'd sold our big 5 acres in Swanson, and we moved into town, into Ponsonby, and rented a flat for 6 months. Actually, we were in Yorohi, wonderful Pippa Coombs, soon to be the councillor for Waitamata, just saying. Yeah, I'm thinking Kane Williamson that. But the 6 months living in an apartment, I loved. I could walk up to SPQR, I could walk to work right in the middle of Ponsonby. I just loved it. But it really taught me that density has to be lived in when it's right for the time in your life. It was right for me, it was not right for my fishing, ute driving West Auckland husband. So we're back in Te Aratu Peninsula, which we love. But it just proves that you need the right time, right place, right choices.
Brilliant. Kia ora. Thank you. So, John, just wanted to talk a little bit about, the low-density suburbs. Do you believe it's possible to retrofit Auckland's low-density suburbs with medium to high-density housing? And is it possible to do it well? And if so, what are some of the challenges?
It is a challenge, but it is possible, in short. But I think, as we know, we're not London, we're not Barcelona, we're not Copenhagen, Stockholm. If you think about it, we don't have many suburbs that have those gridded streets. We've got hilly topography, lots of cul-de-sacs, lots of long meandering roads, and lots of spaces between houses and low density. So it's a challenge to accommodate medium density or terraced housing, apartment type developments in that kind of layout. But it's not impossible. It just does present challenges that you don't find with some other cities that are much denser, that were originally laid out with that sort of density, with the sort of places that Pamela talked about. So, but it can be done, and we're certainly looking to, we've allowed it to be done in Auckland through a very high-profile exercise that Penny House led, along with Penny Perrott here and many others, but it was a huge exercise, and it was really important for Auckland to create those opportunities for different types of housing. And yes, there is some pain and some challenges, and we're not saying at council we've got the rules perfect. We're looking at the rules now again, just fine-tuning some of them. In some cases, we're not really seeing as much density as we probably should be seeing around transport hubs and town centres and so on. So we're looking at why that might be. And in other places, we are seeing some density, and the design isn't great. So we're looking into why is that happening? What more can be done to improve the quality of some of the housing that's going in at those higher densities. It does present design challenges, so I think we're fooling ourselves, and developers are, and property owners are, to think that you can build at that sort of density, or those sort of densities, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-storey buildings, when you've never done it before. You need, there's a bit of design nous and expertise, and that's really required, and I think we're seeing that. The quality development in Auckland at those higher densities that's respectful of its neighbours, and of the streets and parks around it, tends to be designed by people who know how to design. And that's not saying all designers know how to design, because as Pamela would know well, there are some architects and designers who've got a long way to go to get there as well, and may probably never get there. But anyway, that's just a planner's perspective on Auckland. And yeah, some of the challenges in that your question really is, how do you retrofit, how do you get those higher densities and get them happening well? So.
Brilliant. Kia ora. Thanks, John. And so, Pam, it's not just an issue of more density and more homes, but it's also an issue of access to housing. So could you talk us through some of the alternative ownership models we should be exploring as a way to address housing supply and affordability? Some of your thoughts on that?
Sure. But first of all, I'd be a little bit greedy and add on to John's
I
piece
see.
about
Tricky.
retrofitting. Look, one other idea, of course, is that grassroots industry, and this is a little competition that Prefab NZ did called the SNUG, which is a much nicer word than accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, which sounds like some terrible disease you don't want to contract. But the idea is that, of course, council has got a wonderful role in leadership in setting out planning rules, but there's also a role that industry and all of us can play, which is to enable gentle density in our own backyards, where it's appropriate, where it fits in. And that's also a way to remove half the cost, the land cost, by enabling us to provide housing for our children. A souped-up granny flat, if you will. A way to house our future young professionals, a way to house our intergenerational living, our parents, and also a way to enable affordable rental. If we look at states like California, a number of them are putting through rules to enable and open up permitting for these secondary housing units, but and putting on a rent ceiling so that the houses go back into the market as affordable rental units. And then enabling this through financial incentives, removing some of the development contributions in return for the housing, then going into that kind of social housing or rental pool. But the real question you
plug
asked
there.
me,
Yes.
the real question you asked was about questioning our access to housing. Look, I'm really interested in why we keep having this monologue about owning a house. I mean, surely we have to enable more solutions to our young people other than just a single family, single relationship with a single bank for 30 years or worse intergenerationally, which is something we're seeing in Australia. Sorry, that was way too big of a word to get out, wasn't it? But we don't want to see mortgages that we hand down to our children. We want to be handing down a better world to them. So why do we all have to own our own homes? I don't have all the answers, but we do need to question it. We need to look at co-ownership. We need to look at intergenerational ownership. We need to look at how a house functions beyond just purely keeping out the wind and the rain. It's a social unit where so much more happens than just breathing and eating and sleeping. So we really need to look at our access to homes rather than owning a house. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. So in Pia, this is an opportunity to tell people about the work you're doing with rangatahi, as rangatahi. Talk us through what you're doing and how that's benefiting Tamaki Makaurau.
So some of the mahi that Pia and I do is we take zero waste initiatives, or we take parakore to rangatahi across Tamaki Makaurau, and we try to activate their consciousness around climate change and zero waste. So what we have been doing is we go to kura, we go to youth groups, we go to platforms like this, we go to social media, and marae, of course, and we try to reactivate our Māori and Pacific peoples into the Indigenous knowledge that we have, but we need to remember for a zero waste future. If that's a little confusing, it's just what Pia and I do is we try to show that our rangatahi mixed, our rangatahi perspective mixed with our Indigenous mātauranga can educate.
That's all right.
Yep.
Kia ora. Yes, so... So on the 30th of April, we held a conscious climate conversation mana rangatahi summit. We brought together over 110 rangatahi to basically start these conversations about climate change through a te ao Māori perspective and through our ancient knowledge and through whakapapa and pepeha and connecting our rangatahi to te taiao, so the natural world, and focusing on the connection that we have to the world opposed to what we are losing, and as rangatahi for rangatahi. So our perspective is really, really important because obviously we're the ones that will be inheriting this planet. So getting a Māori and Pacific voice out there and being heard, that was what the summit was pretty much for, and to kind of bring awareness to climate change through a different perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So we try to promote our kaupapa, and we have been able to promote it to 2,000 rangatahi across Tamaki Makaurau, and just trying to get them to be the ones to save the world for their future and the generations following after. It was, definitely that.
Brilliant. I've seen examples of your work, and I just see that people are inspired to action. That comes across really powerfully. The people that you're impacting on are future employees, are future voters, and are future participants in our society. So it's really tremendous work. Thank you. Now, Penny. So everybody agrees that Auckland needs more housing, but not everybody wants it in their neighbourhood. How do we overcome, some people nodding, chuckling, how do we overcome this issue of NIMBYism in Auckland, and what role can the council play as a leader in this space?
Yeah, wow, gosh, anyone who's got that answer, please put your hands up now. This is one of the things that gets in the way, and I probably, deferring to our rangatahi to my right, part of it is holding in our minds that this is who Auckland is for. And I'll be provocative because I think we can sit and chat and be nice to each other. But I'll put this out there, and I'm happy not to get a Kane Williamson for it. I've just turned 60. I own my own house, and I've had a fantastic life. Thank you, ratepayers. But there is something that says to me, do we need to throttle back on the listening to people over 60? Where are we going to start listening to our young people who are coming just ahead of us? And I think the NIMBYism, we need to jump over that. I won't go quite as far as saying perhaps all submissions on climate change and on unitary plan changes should be limited to people under 60, which would take me out of the submission process. It's anti-democratic, and I'll never do that. But I think there is a point where we need to say, thank you, heard that, now it's time for our young people who are inheriting all the problems that we've left.
Kia ora, good challenge. I like it. I think you were saying...
I'll be leaving via the back door so that none of my peers can throttle me on the way out.
Yes, quickly. Maybe you'll be faster than many of them. So it's a bad joke. I'm sorry. Sorry. I apologise. I'll leave with you. So guys, we've also got it's a really big day today because we're launching the Auckland Climate Action Framework, ACAF. Rolls off really easily, ACAF. And so really interested from you in terms of what's your vision for Auckland 2050 and what role does density play in that? How can that help deliver on what we want to see from a sustainable, quality Auckland city? So John, I will let you start.
Right. So I think, Andrew, when you kicked off, you did hit a lot of the key points, a lot of the things that have a lot of scientific rigour behind them around the benefits of more compact cities, where you can walk as opposed to driving everywhere, where public transport is far more viable, and therefore emissions far less. I mean, the evidence is all there, so I think you hit a lot of those key points. So I guess that will be the future for Auckland, and we are, if we get it right, heading in that direction where we are a more compact, more sustainable city where it is easier to walk and catch public transport. And I mean, it sounds a bit like a broken record here to me because we've been, many of us, giving this message for such a long time, but it just resonates so true. And that would be, that's where we need to head. I think that's the future, really.
Any additions to that or disagreements?
I would just add that from my perspective, my personal perspective, it's a two-pronged approach. One prong is listening to the experts, in this case the urban design experts, weighing in very heavily around master planning, around transport planning, which always has to happen before housing.
The planners, yeah?
And the planning
And the
experts.
planners.
Yes, and the architects, John. And the second perspective, I'd suggest, welcome to the room, architects. And the second perspective, I'd say, is on the human perspective. And this is one that Penny and I spoke about earlier on this evening, which is, and I'm going to sound super wishy-washy here, but we have to figure out a way to be nice to each other where we put other people ahead of our own. This is in the way we vote. This is in the way we act with each other in every day, in every interaction. We have to think about something other than our own backyards. We simply have to.
Great. Excellent. That might be a good segue into the next question for you, Penny and Waiata and Pia. So, hey, it was a climate emergency was declared, and I was in the room. It's really special. We could hear people chanting in the streets. You guys had really inspired people earlier, and so there's real momentum, and we've done it, right? So what does it mean, and what needs to happen immediately to support that call, to make it real?
So the declaration of a climate change emergency, I think, quite rightly was met with a little bit of cynicism, a little bit of eye rolling, a little bit of scepticism, because what changed from this week to a month ago? The answer is not a lot. But what it does, it just adds a bit of impetus to the work that we're trying to do politically. And I just want to pay tribute to John Morrow, the sustainability team, Alex, Sarah, Perrin, who have worked tirelessly over the last few years on the Climate Change Action Plan / framework. We do a lot of politics, we do a lot of talking. The declaration of an emergency now, I think, will add a little bit of strength to some of the decisions we make, and hopefully we will run every single decision we make as a council through that framework before we decide to do some really stupid things, like continue to spread all the way down to Hamilton, to continue to make decisions that require people to simply be car-based, or to make decisions that lock people into behaviour that doesn't allow the city to be decarbonised. So, emergency, will it change things for now? Absolutely not. Will it change things for the future? Absolutely it will.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Pia and Waiata, just before you start, I'll just encourage the other panellists to start looking at the board there, because we'll now cross after this to questions from the audience. Some will be Slido and some will be hands. But Pia and Waiata, did you want to add to what the councillor said?
So when the climate crisis was called, honestly, I didn't really know what was going to happen. I was hopeful that something was going to come out of this, and I didn't know if there was actually some action that was going to come out of it. But I think calling it as an emergency, because that is really what climate change is now, is really necessary, because when we have an emergency in our everyday lives, we call the police or we call the ambulance, we call 111. We get directed to an operator. They ask us questions about what's happening, who's in the situation, what's going on, and some help will come. Some help will arrive eventually. If no help is given, it's basically classified as neglect. So I think it's a massive push for Auckland Council to do something and actually treat this as an emergency.
Brilliant. Okay, great.
Just make a quick little, just to add to that, and I think Paz summed it up beautifully, but this isn't just Auckland Council. This is Auckland Council acting as a bit of a facilitator for what Auckland, and that's all of you, our businesses, our organisations, and our extended whānau throughout the whole of Auckland, what is everybody going to do to deal with this emergency we're in?
Yeah, here. And we are seeing some real leadership from some businesses. So, for instance, the Climate Leaders Coalition, if you haven't looked at that, that's 100 of New Zealand's largest companies in New Zealand setting a trajectory to dramatically reduce their greenhouse gas emissions down to equivalent to 1.5 degree threshold. So we are seeing some of that, and indeed we need more of it from everybody and businesses. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at some questions from Slido, ask the panel, and then I'll come to some raised hands, okay? So I'll start with the top question there, 12 votes. John, I'll go to you. A holistic approach is needed to provide amenities, for example, schools for dense living. What is Auckland Council doing to coordinate with ministries, I guess central government, to build these facilities?
Good question. So for some of the large redevelopment, regeneration areas that the Crown is looking at, the government's looking at, we are in there, boots and all, with organisations like HLC, who started in Hobsonville and are now morphing into some other entity, Urban Design Group.
Kaianga Ora.
Development Group, Kaianga Ora. So a lot of council staff are supporting the staff within Ministry of Housing and Development and other ministries on those projects where it does need a cross-government, cross-council approach to look at things like schools, and there's definitely a lot of work happening in that space. And within, the provision of amenities isn't just a Crown government responsibility. We've got our own recreation facilities and parks and so on, so the planners in council work very closely with those involved in planning for community facilities and so on. So there's a lot of work happening there. Yep, it's critical, and that relationship with the government, with the amount of redevelopment that's happening of the Housing New Zealand, housing in Auckland is key, and yep, it is happening. And yeah.
Brilliant. So planners are quite key, John.
Did I mention planners? Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that?
Can I just acknowledge, we've got a wonderful person called Jane Lovell-Gadd who's in the room, and my colleague, Councillor Linda Cooper. We, as part of Old Waitakere, were the key players in the development of the Hobsonville development, which I think is density done really well. In other words, good housing choice with good facilities. It took, we started about 18 years ago working with Ministry of Education to get the schools in there, so the schools were there as the houses arrived. This is really hard work, and I think it has been a bit chaotic, but we are certainly doing that work again, and thanks to our planners for that.
And also small businesses, transport out there, it was quite well thought through, the additional elements, I think.
Can I just add in also, it would be great to see the retirement village community providers brought into that conversation, because there's nothing more successful than when you see primary and education facilities co-located near retirement village, where you can get that blend of age groups and activity and observation, and it'd be great to see those types of providers, commercial providers, non-profit providers, brought into that conversation as well.
Great, thank you. Round of applause there. Okay, so we don't have someone from Auckland Transport here, but we'll look to the panel for some comment on this. It has got 22 votes. So our population is increasing, road space isn't. What will it take for our roads to be used for moving people and freight, and not just for parking cars, or not for parking cars?
Oh, public transport?
Free public transport?
Yeah. I like it. A very short, clear answer. That was brilliant. Okay, well, I'm just going to cross to you now. If you could raise your hand, the microphone will come to you. Yes, I will. If you're comfortable, it does help if you tell people who you are, but don't feel you have to. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Boopsie. I actually present regulation planning. So I have a question. If density is a dirty word, I don't think it's a dirty word. But it's how not to make it a bad word. And I think to make it a good word, you need to think about our built environments already. So of the existing facilities we have, community groups, community spaces, community centers, when we have one local initiative, and pretty much across the entire city, it's community spaces that everyone's picking, pools and stuff like that, where in the policy And where in the planning is it written to prioritize shared public spaces? While we worry about housing all the time, I don't think we consider enough the shared public space. And it's for the whole panel because the earth is our public space, the planet. So how can we put in policy a priority for this?
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thanks for the question. John, would you like to touch on that first, and then there's some negotiation going on?
Negotiation happening. We might both have a go at it. So I'm now going to redeem myself in the eyes of my peers, i.e. the 60 plus. Some of the best examples of town planning that was done probably happened, at the turn of the century or just after. We do understand why, turn of which century? I'm saying like maybe 50, 60 years ago. Some of the best public spaces are our old public spaces that people understand, that work well, and that we know how to use. We need to recreate those places by becoming more dense and going up a bit. We can use some of those to free up spaces where we have those opportunities, as Pam was talking about before, those incidental bumping into each other places. You're all popping down to the cafe, or you're going to the laundromat, or you're taking your dog to the park, or you're taking your grandkids for a walk. It's those small, intimate public spaces that are the critical ones that make up for the fact that you don't have a back garden, and I think we can do better in planning for those. It is in the unitary plan to make sure that we protect and develop those places, but at the moment I think we've got a long way to go to match some of the fantastic work that was done previously.
Brilliant. Thank you. Good summary. John, are you happy with that?
I'm very happy with that.
What do you give that out of 10? Is that pretty? No, we'll do that later. Okay. Just hang on. Hold. You're getting too keen.
So Pam has taught me to say that.
Yeah, you're too keen, John. Okay, that will be revealed. It's a really good question. Now I'm going to go to the Slido again, and this is a great question from someone who I think I really respect. For rangatahi ki para kore, so you guys, what do you think about the reality of our generation living in high-density apartments, I guess, or terraced houses, which we probably can't afford to live in?
I think the only way to make density sexy for rangatahi or for youth is to be represented in the buildings that we will see and that are surrounded in our city, that we are surrounded by in the city. I think free public transport to the accessible jobs for Māori and Pacific rangatahi. I think jobs that, I think that having support to support our rangatahi to find their passion opposed to just finding a job and living in a job. I think that's how we make density more sexy.
Wauta, did you want to add?
Yeah, and just with the reality of future generations living in high density apartments, especially if it is the way that we are going towards, then it is important to, especially if we are the culture of Tamaki Makaurau, we want to see ourselves in that future. So having Māori designs, having having spaces where Māori architects or Māori designs are living and breathing, and there is a meaning to those places. That's the holistic approach that that Māori designers can bring on, that we can connect to and see ourselves in that. Especially if we are going to be living in high density apartments.
Yep. So a built environment that reflects the community. That's really key.
And I also don't think it's realistic to have rangatahi in high density areas anyway. As rangatahi, we need space, we need green, we need moana, we need room to be rangatahi. So I think it's probably not affordable at this point. So if we can try and change that, I think that would be.
And I think we need to talk about choices too. A high density apartment is just one typology, and that's not necessarily suited to us, but it's good to think about other typologies. Like you see, for example, in Vancouver, these kind of super houses. It just basically looks like a detached house, only it's kind of supersized, and it's actually got like 4 or 6 apartments inside it. So for all intents and purposes, it's got that domestic look, the pitched roof, but you've got intergenerational living if you want. And it can be affordable through different kind of mechanisms. One of the ones I just saw recently out of California, it's called point.com. You can basically sell a proportion of your house or your home back to this platform, and then they own a percentage of the appreciation going forward. So we need to think about some of these other types of financial mechanisms so that it's not about owning the whole house or the whole home. You know, there's got to be another way to do it.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I will just reflect on something to touch here on a point Waiata made. So Panuku Development Auckland done some great work on encouraging and respecting tiaranga design. That's been picked up by Homestar, the standard for healthier homes. So homes that are built with Māori design are rewarded in that system, and I think that's a positive development. Okay, so a show of hands from the audience. Yes, the quickest was the third row from the back on the right in the blue jersey. So we've just got a microphone coming to you.
Hello, I'm John Potter, and I think probably most Aucklanders still live in a section, either a half section or a full section, with a bit of grass and a tree in their backyard, which we all regard as good at the moment. But as time goes on, and we're thinking now 20 years, 30 years, my grandchildren, when they're 50, in their 50 years' time, or maybe their children or grandchildren in 100 years' time, are not going to be living like that. They're going to be living in dense housing situations, particularly in the town centres. So the first question is, do you think pocket parks are a good idea? In other words, just a section of grass and maybe the odd tree. And secondly, if the panel does think it's a good idea, why is the council, seeing this is run by the council, why is the council, through its development arm, trying to sell off any pocket parks they can to get money for the council? I'd have thought that it's ideal, it doesn't cost them anything, to leave these as pocket parks for 20, 30, 40 years hence, so that they'll be able to be used by the community to let the grass grow under their feet and the trees to be climbed.
Great, thank you.
I think that feels like one that I should field. And it does, we are getting quite a lot of people grumpy with us for the properties that we are selling, and I think at times it does look as if we've got a bit of a wholesale sell-up happening out in Auckland. But what we're trying to do is to say, in some areas they're lucky enough to have pocket parks, let's make sure that we keep those, but some areas have nothing. And there are some areas in Auckland who didn't invest in pocket parks and in open spaces, and we do have to redress that inequitable balance. We don't sell pocket parks in areas that don't have enough parks, and we will certainly make sure that as we densify that there are places that people can walk to that are small pocket parks. I think where we've got it wrong as a council is we haven't explained that well enough, and we haven't given people the confidence that we've got our eyes on that clearly, and that ideally as areas become more dense we will provide open space, and enough open space for people to get out and get the grass under their feet.
Great, a great answer. Thank you, Penny. So I'll just ask for the microphone down the front here. Just coming.
I've already got it.
Oh, you've already got the mic. Okay, we'll go to the back and then we'll come to you. Sorry about that. Yep.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, kia ora.
Kia ora. My name's Mark Graham. I publish magazines in the building and architectural field. Everybody I speak to is very happy with increased density in the city, but one of the concerns that everybody voices to me is the need for decent design. And I'm really tired of seeing crappy infill housing and poorly constructed medium density dwellings with crappy materials that are not going to last very well. How can we ensure that what we build is going to be good and is going to last, and it's not going to turn into the slums that we don't want?
Those are all very topical points, and there's a huge amount of dialogue in the construction industry about the quality of our construction, our building materials and products and methods. you'll be aware that Minister Salisa announced a building legislative reform consultation period recently, and those submissions are being put together by MB as we speak. And one of the solutions put forward is the idea of a national material and product database as a way to have predetermined information and compliance on hand, so that our wonderful building consent authorities and the building consent officers can process with clear and transparent information. Let's just say that this is a work in progress, and as far as I'm aware, it's one of the highest priorities of both MB and Minister Salisa's team.
I can't really answer this like in a big scale, but I just want to say that I think going forward, if we're going to build any more high-density buildings, we need to focus on having locally sourced resources and stopping getting our resources from overseas and investing in overseas suppliers. I think if we're going to go forward, it has to be sustainable, eco-friendly, locally grown resources.
Great, yeah. Any?
Thanks, Andrew. Kia ora, Pia. It's fantastic. Mark, I think, in addition to building code and building quality, I think part of your question may have been, well, I'd be remiss in saying that you've got to have good planning rules. And we've got some pretty good rules in our plan in Auckland, but and you've got to review those rules, and we are reviewing them. So I've mentioned that before. And I've mentioned the need to, once you're getting into those 3, 4, 5-story developments, and even some of the multi-unit lower-rise stuff, you've got to have good designers on it, and we've got to get our design profession sort of understanding and learning and creating better designs. Within council, so just a bit of a plug for council, we have a team of urban designers, and we have an urban design panel. And so plea to developers is come in early and talk and get some of that advice, good advice that we've got within council, either from our design staff or for the bigger developments, our urban design panel. So we've got that panel, most developers know it, use it early, and even beyond that, before you write the check and buy the site and commit yourself to that sort of investment, come and talk and figure out what might be possible. And we really need to move in that direction of getting developers to get options on land before they commit, because that's often where it comes unstuck. They've paid far too much. We now have a unitary plan that doesn't have density restrictions in it. So, developers used to be able to say, well, that's a 20-unit site. There's no way the council can say no to that, so that's the value of it. They're probably still paying that sort of value or more, but potentially it's not the right site to get that sort of density. So you get into a confrontation with council over design, and no one's the winner in that situation. So some points there.
Some learning to go on. I'm going to move to the question from the gentleman at the front here. He's been waiting a while. And just before he speaks, just to remind you, that do use Slido to answer the question we'd like your feedback on. So you can put questions, but also interact with the question we've asked of you. But, sir.
I'm Bill Rayner. I'm the chairman for Grey Power in Auckland, and I have been working with Penny across the last I suppose it's almost 10 years now with the Auckland planning. And the difficulty that the senior people have is that we had probably the world's most livable city before we started, and it's with the population growth, it's created stresses and strains. And I think the real issue that we do have right now is that we were talking about the cities of Europe and Vancouver and Pittsburgh. Those are cities, particularly the European ones, have developed over 1,000 years. Whereas we had the situation in Auckland, which I think the council dealt with reasonably well in the circumstances. We had 3 years to do this planning exercise and put it in place. And I have huge admiration for Penny, who led that process. It could have been a complete disaster. It's not good now, but
do you have a question?
Yes, my question has sort of been touched on a little. The senior community now extremely concerned about the two issues that have been touched on to a certain extent. We've heard about the need for open space, but there's so much pressure on our existing open space being taken away for development in various shapes and forms.
Yes.
And then second one is the shonky building issue. And I'd just like to ask John and Penny, particularly with the open space, just how we're going to provide that green space in a highly dense city. In a place like London, you couldn't touch a park that's been there for 100 years, whereas here we tend to be slicing them off and cutting them in half. And it's just, what is the plan for creating that inner city green open space?
Right, kia ora, thank you.
So just quickly, there's a couple of things. So first of all, just as far as the wider issue goes, and this is part of our climate change plan, is we've got our urban ngāhere strategy, which is our urban tree planting strategy. So, bringing the green lungs back into the city. We are, and I think, again, it goes back to what I said earlier, I think we've got a little bit of misunderstanding of what Council's doing. We aren't slicing off and developing heaps of our parks. I know Chamberlain Park is a really difficult and divisive issue, and I'm sure there are people on both sides of the debate, but some of this is reforming and reusing our parks in a different way, and also looking at buying green space where there is a lack of green space, and some of it there does need to be a bit of a trade. I don't think everyone out there is happy if we were to put the rates up 10%, so we just need to keep the account ticking over. Every time we ask for something new, someone pays, and actually you pay. So if in some areas where there's a huge amount of open space, every now and again we will sell a bit to go in and buy open space where there's a lack of.
Can I throw something in there?
I'm going to stop you there, Pam.
Oh, accountability. Can
Yeah,
we spread
sorry
it
for
beyond
that.
the council?
Yeah, I'm going to...
All of us?
Hey, I just wanted to say thanks a lot for for all of the interaction, and just note some things which I think are pretty key that touch on some of the questions here and some of the feeling from the audience. And that is some people such as HLC have done some great work looking at density. So about 5 years ago, they built terraced homes which were far smaller than the average Auckland home. And everybody said to them, nobody's going to want them. They had a significant survey, and they had hundreds and hundreds of people through, and they found a huge response showing that when those homes are built to quality, good air quality, good daylight, those sorts of things, that people were receptive to it. I just think it's really good to reflect on the fact that you can do this well and that density can work and people respond to that. There's been a few questions around quality. I think one thing that the council's done really well is delivering that through Homestar, through their Panuku development organisation, to lead to insulation, air quality and those sorts of things. It's shameful, our building code in New Zealand, that's been shown repeatedly from international research, so they are leading on that. Now I was going to stop because we actually want to ask you some questions. So it's our time to put some questions to you, and I wanted to demonstrate how we're going to get some feedback from you on this, and it plays into a recent sporting event. So we all know that when a boundary happens, I don't really want to talk about boundaries right now, but when a batter does really well, like Mr. Williamson, so that he hits a 6, right, now if he hits a 6, that's a great thing, and the audience erupt, and they put up signs showing a 6, right? So I'm going to demonstrate a question to the panel here. If they could grab the materials, I'll help you, Penny. So I'm going to ask the panel a question, and they're going to demonstrate an answer. So a 6 is a positive response because the batter has hit a 6. An out, obviously, is not that positive. Do we get it? Okay, great. So I'm going to ask, panel, what did you think of the audience today so far? 6, a 9. Awesome. That's great. That's great. So obviously you're a very strong audience. Now I'd ask you to check under your seats because I'm going to ask you some questions. So just have a look under your seat. I want to get your response to some questions. Okay. Has everybody got some of that? So is a 6 a good response? Okay, great. So what do you guys think? Are we doing enough to increase density in Auckland? Hold up your panels. Look at that, wow. A few 6s over here. Okay, great, thank you. A few 6s here, thanks a lot. Are we doing density well? Great. Are we doing density well is the question. So a few outs, a few sixes here, third row back, that's useful. Okay, so now moving on to the Auckland Climate Action Framework. I feel like I'm at the cricket, although that's quite hard. Science says we need to cut carbon emissions by 50% by 2030. Do we need Auckland to move to that target and cut their emissions by 50% by 2030? Let's have a look. Okay, so lots more sixes. Okay, there's a few nines out there. I want to ask about maths competence at the moment. Okay, so just last two questions. Do you really think, if a number of people have said this, obviously, I couldn't comment, but do you think Kane Williamson should run for Prime Minister? Sixes. And perhaps more importantly, should Kane Williamson run for Mayor? Okay. Hey, thanks so much for your feedback. Just to help inform the polling around the Auckland Climate Action Framework, that was a resounding row of, I'd say, 95% sixes and 5% nines in response to that question. So that's pretty special. If anyone wants help with their mathematics, we've got some tutors at the door on the way out. Hey, first of all, don't you think the panel were great? Gave up their time. Some people still holding up their sixes, which is great. We do have world-leading people in the Auckland Council and councillors, and I think they're working really hard to improve our city, and I'm really proud of everything they're doing to deliver on that. And so I want to say thank you to the panel, and that brings me to a really special moment to say for the vote of thanks. So when I came on board about 2.5 years ago, my predecessor went through a whole stack of business cards. She went, you don't need to meet him, you don't need to meet her, you don't need to meet him, and she pulled out this card and said, there's this guy, John Morrill, right? He's a good guy. And he's really doing a lot for Auckland. You really need to catch up with him and keep close to him, because him and his team are doing some really good stuff for quality of life and delivering for Auckland. So I'm really delighted to welcome John Morrow, Chief Sustainability Officer for Auckland Council, to give our vote of thanks. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko John Morrow Takongoa, ko Takatoronga, hey Chief Sustainability Officer, aho. And I've never done a vote of thanks, so this is really fun. Can we Kane Williamson Andrew, please? So much so, he actually did the vote of thanks himself. So I don't know if there's actually much work that I need to do here, but I will just say a few words. I guess the simplest way to say a vote of thanks is to say, please vote and thanks. And so vote on this plan or this framework, actually have your say. It launches today, and we really need to hear it from you. We need you to tell other people about it. So vote on that. And we actually have an election coming up, and democracy is fundamental to how we win on climate change and how we win on density done well. So really take that seriously. I forgot my copy of the framework. Imagine the most beautiful looking framework. Oh, or Andrew. Look at that. So for those of you who came right in quickly for the drinks or for the camaraderie, you might have missed the booth that people were standing in front of saying, look, we're launching this thing today. And this is a first take. We've done this over 18 months with iwi, with central government, with businesses, with community groups, with rangatahi, with many of those in this room. And this is where we got to after 18 months of doing something quite differently. Usually this is when we start and we say, okay, have your say, we've done this thing in a big bunker, what do you think? We've actually worked quite extensively across thousands of people and organizations to put this together. So it's robust, it's been modeled, our C40 cities colleagues have looked at it. But of course we're not there yet, because some of you probably haven't seen this, and you need to. So please have your say, it's very easy, and join us actually in implementation. Actually, I think that's the most important thing, is how are we gonna get this done? So let me just reflect a little bit about what I heard here today. And there's a real connection to the key moves, and yes, they actually might be dance moves, the 11 key moves in the Climate Action Framework. So I guess first we heard from Otani, and as he does every time, he really nails it. It's a high energy day, so here we are, high energy. And what he said was, whenever winds blow our way, tomorrow's going to be a glorious day. This is dark stuff. I think the Grey Power person said really well, this was the world's most livable city when we kind of got here, and look what we've done to it. We need to keep optimism in mind. From my perspective, it's dark, it's real, we know what climate change is going to look like for Auckland over the next 100 years. It's not super pretty if we just sit back and let it happen to us. But it could be great, it could be amazing, it could be healthy and equitable and clean and wonderful if we actually kind of put some elbow grease into it. So I think Otani's start is really perfect. We can have a glorious day if we actually work our way there. Andrew, yes, this is the best Auckland conversation, so thank you for that. And then, words in the conversation around density, community, people, connection. I mean, these are the things that innately, I believe, humans want. It's why I can Kane Williamson you for being here tonight, is that we want to connect as people with ideas with each other. That's kind of what it's about. Dare I say, that's part of what life is about. So I think those themes came through loud and clear. We need to take those themes and that korero and actually instill that into the places we care about and into the fabric of Auckland. I heard, are we going in the right direction? Yep, or actually I heard, we're going in the right direction, which is comforting. I'd say, could we go faster? Can we dig deep? Can we actually double down on our efforts because we need to be quite a bit bolder? I've heard about, from Pamela, these aren't new concepts. It's always healthy to remember we're not trying to reinvent how to do really complicated stuff, except for maths, I guess. And that was a home run. Is that the appropriate analogy? There's a real home run. The American in me says, you hit it out of the park on that one, Andrew. So these aren't new concepts. We just need to apply this locally to what we're doing here in Auckland. And that's tricky, but we're not inventing something from brand new. I think it's a really important point from Pam. I heard quite rightly from Waiata and from Pia, this is about friends, and it's the connections and the backyard and the people who will take care of you when you fall down that matter. That's right to the core. I heard from John about retooling the rules, kind of post-unitary plan. That was a big deal. It's a big deal for any city. But we're not done yet. Just like climate change, we've done a bunch of things. We're not there yet. We need to keep getting great and actually dial it down. I heard a little bit about reactivation from Waiata and Pia, and I just love the feeling about reactivating to restoring, not just doing things a little bit less bad, but actually really doing things well. I heard from Councillor Hull said, should I even be heard over 60? That's a gutsy thing to say in front of a crowd that includes some over 60 folks. I've got 17 years, or actually not quite, to get there, so I'm still relevant. But I think it's really important, or I guess you be the judge, have your say. I think it's really important to think, who are we hearing from? I'm out, thank you. Who are we hearing from? Who is representing the decisions that they get to make in really difficult seats? And is everybody represented? Are we representing people who don't actually have their say very often? We as council need to get better at that. We as a community need to help all of us get better at that. That was a really important point. We talked about the climate emergency, what happens now. I think that's actually a really important point. And boy, I've took so many notes, and you're thinking we could do it again. I'm doing it again. So I'll just sum up in a couple last points. Making density sexy. It's great to hear from Pia and Waiata about how to actually make it real and how to make it something that is not just not a dirty word, but something that's actually exciting. And as I turn my pages here, some great questions from the audience. I really want to Kane Williamson you all for some great questions about pocket parks, about design, about the quality of built materials. Sourced locally, great point. And actually some call, I think Pam helped us get there, to really call out what our role is as council, because we play a really big role here. Let's not undercook this. We actually hold a lot of the levers, and we need to pull them harder, maybe even in a different direction. But there's like a limited slice of what we can do. And one of those things we can do collectively is say, well, actually this is, and I'm not trying to put it on central government here, but a lot of these things funding-wise and decision-wise, like our building code, really come down to central government. So how do we as a collective say, dear government, now's the right time. The zero carbon bill closed yesterday for submissions. Hopefully people had their say. Now's the right time to actually give them the signals to make the tough calls. Let's do that together. So I think, yes, is it 88%? I think I have right in front of me that most of you are committed to the original question that we placed to you at the start, so that's great. I think what I take from that is at least 8 or 9 out of 10 of you have decided you're in this, you're with us. And so we need to be gutsy, we need to be appropriately humble about how we repurpose stuff, and compassionate with each other, but we really got to go for this one, because we don't get a second chance to deal with things like how we shape our city and how we deal with climate change. That's why hopefully some of us are here today. We need you, stick with us, and have your say. Thank you very much.